This is a Suzuki Hayabusa, but you probably already knew that, for it is one of the most recognisable motorcycles the world has ever seen. And even in this 2021 edition, the design is barely changed from the original that launched more than 2 decades ago. It's still long, low, bulbous, and to some people's eyes absolutely hideous, but it's still ridiculously fast, and more on that later. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The year was 1999, and motorcycle manufacturers were in a race to build the world's fastest motorcycle. The limits of speed were ever expanding, and on the verge of a new millennium, Honda's Super Blackbird held the crown. But not so fast Honda, quite literally, for Suzuki had a trick perched upon its gauntlet in the form of the 175 horsepower Hayabusa. It was named in Japanese for the peregrine falcon, a bird known for its 200-mile-an-hour vertical hunting dive, and, perhaps more importantly, for being the natural hunter of the humble blackbird. And it had that top speed title firmly in its sights. Upon launch, the Busa swooped and stole that title, reaching a top speed in excess of 190 miles per hour. Further development sent it creeping towards a 200 club, but before it could achieve that elusive double ton, an informal 300 km an hour top speed limitation was agreed between European and Japanese manufacturers. That meant future Busas were limited to 186 miles per hour. Nonetheless, it remained relevant, part of the furious, achingly aerodynamic inline 4 club. It stayed in production through 2 decades, 2 generations, and almost 200,000 units. And now, after a brief hiatus, the Busa is back, and it really is better than ever. Yes, it may well look the same as before, bar a few sharpened lines and aero tweaks. But is that really a bad thing? It's as bulbous and recognisable as the Jumbo Jet, but to some as iconic as the Concorde. And after all, the designer's intent was to create a somewhat grotesque design and a strong initial impact, a totally new styling that would not be out of date within a few years. And they certainly succeeded on both accounts. Under its controversial close, the Hayabusa retains a twin-spar aluminium alloy main frame, but that is where all hand-me-downs end. There's a lighter subframe, newly set up fully adjustable front and rear suspension, new 7-spoke wheels with exclusive Bridgestone tyres, and enlarged 320mm front discs with Brembo Stylema calipers. The 1340cc inline 4 receives a host of new components, with lighter pistons, more rigid conrods, a revised crankshaft and crankcases, a new camshaft with revised cam profiles, and a new cam chain tensioner. There's also an updated gearbox, a new slipper clutch, a new magneto, an updated fuel system, and a new linear ride-by-wire electronic throttle. One thing it doesn't have, however, is the GIX 1000's variable valve timing, but that will just mean it will be generally more reliable, durable, and cheaper to service. The result? Nothing short of spectacular. The Hayabusa has always been known for being achingly fast and impressively smooth, but this latest iteration really sets a new standard for all-round performance. 187 horsepower, that's 10 less than the predecessor, arrives at 9,700 RPM, and peak torque of 150 Nm is delivered at 7,000 RPM. And while the bike revs to 11,000 RPM, the headline performance is halfway there, thanks to a healthy abundance of torque in the middle range. Then there's a drive mode selector alpha, through which you can choose from 3 preset and 3 user-defined modes. All are accessible through the colour TFT screen, which is flanked by large analogue tacho and speedometers, a nod to the iconic clocks of the original. With power mode selector in the sharpest of the 3 settings, throttle response is instantaneous, and there is ample thrust through the gears as you ascend to triple figures. It's still limited to 186 miles per hour, but it gets there in mere milliseconds. And upon a 700-metre stretch of empty runway at launch, I glanced down and caught the needle tickling 170. And as you would imagine, the link brakes stop it pretty sharpish too. The quick shifter takes a little coaxing down low, but higher up it's slick, and it's still switchable for those after a truly analogue feel. It can sometimes feel a little tricky to drop into first gear at a standstill, with the bike having to be rolled back and forth to get it to comply. While the Hayabusa is undoubtedly one of the most powerful sports bikes I've ever ridden, It is surprisingly also one of the most comfortable. The inverted coil spring oil-damped fork is multifaceted, smooth and plush but serious at high speeds, while the link-type rear is neutral, if slightly bouncy on rougher roads. The bike is still huge, long and low, and at 264 kilograms wet, incredibly heavy. But Suzuki has worked that to the Hayabusa's advantage, and it carries you through bends, while remaining so planted on straights that it's easy to underestimate your true speed. In fact, there's no urgency here at all, and instead a forgiving nature that responds deftly to everything from the most gentle to the most ham-fisted of rider inputs. It doesn't change direction quite as instantaneously as, say, a GSX-R, but this doesn't purport to be a world superbike. Instead, it's a powerful pleasure cruiser, offering high-speed thrills in a comprehensive package. And it's a surprisingly economic one at that. You can get 41.7 miles per gallon under very spirited riding conditions. At face value, this may just look like a sharpened version of the previous generation, but technologically, the Hayabusa has really matured. And after all, Suzuki could never really have deviated too much from that proven formula. The bike had to remain true to its roots to appease the purists, yet be relevant enough to attract a new generation of customer. And if you can get past that Marmite styling, the third generation Hayabusa really is a marvellous thing. It's ridiculously fast but incredibly usable, and it comes with all the creature comforts you would expect from a more touring-focused machine. In this case, it's very much a matter of evolution rather than revolution. And as Suzuki itself touts, nothing can quite come close to the sheer thrill afforded by the third generation Hayabusa.